I was halfway through stacking firewood when the knock echoed across the trees. Sharp, rhythmic, and completely out of place in the quiet mountain air. Our cabin sat 3 miles off the main road, tucked behind pines so thick the sun had to fight its way through. Nobody ever knocked out here. They called first. They texted. Or they simply didn't come. But that knock, it had the confidence of someone who believed the world owed them an answer. I wiped my hands on my jeans, glanced at the smoke curling from the chimney, and headed for the door. Before I even reached it, I heard her. The unmistakable nasal pitch that could cut through drywall. "Hello? I've been knocking for 5 minutes. This is absolutely unacceptable." My stomach dropped in disbelief. No way. I opened the door slowly. And there she was, HOA Karen herself, standing on my porch in her winter boots like she owned the entire forest. Her hair was perfect, her clipboard even more perfect, and somehow she still managed to look offended by the existence of nature. What are you doing here?" I asked, because my brain couldn't come up with anything more intelligent. She huffed, shouldering past me as if the cabin belonged to her. "I'm here for an inspection. There have been reports of unauthorized construction, smoke violations, and possible zoning breaches." I blinked at her. "Karen, this is a private cabin, on private land, in the mountains. This isn't even in the jurisdiction of the HOA. She smiled. The tight, condescending kind that made you want to check your wallet. That's what people say when they're hiding something. She lifted her clipboard like a sheriff's badge. "I am performing a full compliance review." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It slipped out before I could stop myself. "Compliance with what? Trees?" Her eyes narrowed. "I can and will proceed. And if you attempt to obstruct me, the HOA will take action." Right then, I heard the crunch of snow behind me. My wife stepping out of the cabin hallway. Calm. Focused. Holding something in her hand. Karen didn't see it yet, but when she did, her entire face would freeze. My wife stepped into the doorway with that quiet confidence she only used when things were about to get interesting. She had her hair tied back, sleeves pushed up, and in her hand, the crisp, folded document she'd been waiting weeks to receive. Karen, meanwhile, had already wandered halfway across our living room, tapping her pen on her clipboard like she was inspecting a crime scene. "These windows," she muttered, scribbling something dramatically, "do not look regulation approved. And this wood stove? Wow, this is a fire hazard if I've ever seen one." "It's literally certified," I said. She ignored me. My wife cleared her throat. Karen didn't turn. "I'm in the middle of an inspection." "Karen," my wife repeated, firmer this time. Finally, Karen spun around, annoyed. "What?" "I'm busy documenting violations. This cabin is a mess of non-compliant." My wife unfolded the document with a slow, deliberate motion. "Before you continue, you should read this." The paper caught the light as she held it up. Karen's eyes darted to it, bored at first, until she recognized the header. Her voice cracked. Is that a—" "Yes," my wife said calmly. "A court-issued warrant for access to the HOA's financial records, property actions, and board communications. Effective immediately." The color drained from Karen's face like someone had unplugged her. I don't understand. Why would you have that?" "Because," my wife said, stepping closer, "your HOA has been trespassing, sending unauthorized notices, and attempting to assert control over private land you have no jurisdiction over." And the judge agreed. Karen took a step back, then another. She looked at the paper like it was radioactive. You can't just— This is harassment," she stammered. "No," my wife answered, voice steady. "This is accountability." For the first time since I'd known her, Karen wasn't yelling. She wasn't demanding. She wasn't threatening. She was scared. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers. "I need to call the board." My wife shook her head. "You really don't." "Read the second page." Karen hesitated, then snatched the warrant from her hand. Her eyes scanned the text, and froze. Her lips parted in shock. You got that approved?" The room went dead silent, and that's when the knocking started again. Loud, urgent, from outside. The pounding on the door rattled the window panes, heavy, deliberate knocks, nothing like Karen's impatient tapping earlier. Karen jolted like someone had fired a gun behind her. The warrant trembled in her hand. I held up a calming hand to my wife and moved toward the door, every instinct in me bracing for the worst. Out here, in the middle of the woods, when someone shows up unannounced, it's rarely good news. I pulled the door open just a crack and peeked outside. 2 men in bright HOA windbreakers stood on the porch, huffing from the climb up our driveway. One was red-faced and sweating. The other had that overinflated sense of authority only a clipboard and polyester jacket could give. The taller one barked, "We received a distress call from board member Karen. She stated she was being illegally detained during an inspection." Behind me, Karen whispered, "I didn't say detained. I said I might be impeded." I opened the door wider, leaning casually on the frame. "Fellas, this is private land. Off-grid. Outside your HOA boundary by..." I pointed toward the woods. "All those trees in about 3 miles. The shorter man lifted his clipboard like he was about to knight someone. "We have reason to believe violations are occurring that affect the greater community." "The community," I repeated slowly, "is 20 minutes downhill from here." Karen rushed to their side, waving the warrant like it was a ransom note. They threatened me with legal action. They're trying to shut down the HOA." My wife folded her arms. "No, Karen. We're holding your board accountable for trespassing, issuing illegal notices, and falsifying property boundaries." Both men went pale. The red-faced one stepped forward. "Ma'am, a warrant? For our records?" Karen thrust it at him. "Look, they actually got a judge to sign it." He snatched it, eyes darting across the page. The second man leaned in. Both of their expressions slowly collapsed into horror. This is a full-access warrant," the short one whispered. "Emails, ledgers, board decisions, property reassignments, and," my wife added smoothly, "any attempt to interfere with the execution of this warrant carries federal penalties." Silence, thick enough to drown in. Karen's voice cracked as she backed away from them. You said they could never win." The 2 board members looked at her like she'd just set their office on fire. The taller man swallowed. "Karen, did you tell them about the lake parcel?" Karen's face went white. I stepped forward. "What lake parcel?" All 3 of them froze, and that's when the truth began to unravel. The 3 of them stared at me like I'd just stepped onto a landmine they'd hoped I'd never find. Karen's lips pressed together so tightly they practically disappeared. The 2 board members exchanged the kind of look people give each other right before confessing to something catastrophic. I crossed my arms. "Someone explain what the lake parcel is. Now." The taller man exhaled shakily, rubbing sweat from his forehead. "Look, it was supposed to be handled internally. A clerical adjustment. Nothing harmful." My wife stepped beside me. Translation, "You tried to steal something." The shorter board member winced. "It's not, stealing is a strong word. Try me," my wife said, unblinking. Finally, Karen snapped. "It was just land nobody was using. You 2 live out here with your little cabin and your trees and your privacy, and the HOA needed revenue. The lakefront area could have been turned into a community recreation space." I blinked at her. "The lakefront? Our lakefront? The one that's been part of our deed for 40 years? The shorter man swallowed. Karen pushed the board to quietly reclassify it as undeveloped community land. "We were told it wouldn't cause problems." My wife scoffed. "So you tried to redraw our property lines on paper and hope we wouldn't notice?" The taller man nodded miserably. "Karen said you'd never find out, and if you did, you'd never fight it." Karen pointed at me with that familiar Karen righteousness. "You barely attend community meetings. You're never involved. Someone responsible needed to make decisions." I stared at her, stunned yet not surprised. "That's not responsibility, Karen. That's fraud." The 2 board members flinched at the word. "Hard." Karen threw her hands up. "Oh, please. Everyone reassigns a little unused land now and then. And besides, your cabin isn't even in our jurisdiction. You've been living like you're above the community." "We are above it," I said, pointing toward the mountain slope. "Literally." My wife stepped forward, her voice low, calm, lethal. "Karen, that warrant? It specifically names the lake parcel reclassification. Someone tipped us off, and the judge agreed to investigate." The color drained from all 3 faces simultaneously. "Someone tipped you off?" the taller man whispered. My wife nodded. "Yes, and they told us something else we haven't mentioned yet." The 3 HOA officials leaned in involuntarily, panic etched into their expressions. She paused. "The anonymous whistleblower was from your own board." Every drop of sound vanished from the cabin. Then, a new voice echoed from outside the door. I think it's time they knew the rest. All eyes snapped toward the doorway. Outside, framed by drifting snow and the fading gray light of afternoon, stood a man I recognized only vaguely. One of the quieter HOA board members. The type who never raised his voice, never took sides, never seemed particularly eager to be involved. Yet here he was, breath visible in the cold, coat half-zipped, eyes heavy with something between guilt and relief. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Even Karen, who normally guarded boundaries like a dragon hoarding gold, didn't try to stop him.
Mark? The shorter board member whispered. What are you doing here?
Mark shut the door gently behind him. Finishing what I started. Karen's face twisted. You tipped them off, you little traitor? Mark didn't even look at her. I warned you, Karen. Reassigning the lake parcel was illegal. Falsifying the boundary maps was illegal. Pressuring the board to sign off on it was illegal. And dragging these two into your mess. Oh, don't pretend you're innocent, Karen snapped. You all agreed! Mark finally met her eyes, and his voice dropped into something quietly devastating. We agreed because you threatened to report us for dereliction of duty if we didn't. The shorter man groaned, collapsing onto the nearest chair. She said she'd get us removed. She said we'd be sued. She said, Karen shrieked, Lies! All lies! But no one looked convinced, not even her. Mark turned to me and my wife. I came here because you deserved the truth. The reclassification wasn't just a property grab. Karen planned to lease the lakefront to a private contractor, a big one. She would have earned a commission. My wife raised an eyebrow. A personal financial incentive? Mark nodded. A large one. I felt the anger crawl up my spine, slow and hot. So this wasn't about community at all. This was about money. Karen scoffed. Oh, please. It's called opportunity. Something you two wouldn't understand living out here like hermits. The taller board member buried his face in his hands. Karen, they have a warrant. A judge is already reviewing the documents. Mark stepped forward. And I'll testify. Karen spun toward the door like she was preparing to bolt, but my wife's voice cut through the room, steady as granite. Don't bother, Karen. Law enforcement is already on the way. We gave them the warrant copies 2 days ago. Karen froze mid-step. Knuckles whitened. Breath hitched. The fight finally drained out of her. Mark exhaled, shoulders sagging with relief. I looked around the room, at the cabin, at the trembling HOA officials, at the snow beginning to fall in thick flakes outside, and realized something strange. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, the silence felt peaceful. The storm had finally broken. If this one hit home, tap-like, it tells the algorithm you stand with people who refuse to be pushed around. Subscribe to Karen Files so you never miss moments where justice swings back the other way. And tell me in the comments, after everything Karen pulled, what would you have done?